Perfect. Thank you, Dawn. Can everyone hear me okay?
We can hear you.
You can or you can't?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, thank you. I think that was a yes. So good afternoon, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak here today. I am an assistant professor at the Department of Geography and Geoinformation Science at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. And I'm a geographic information scientist. I use spatial data, spatial analysis, and spatial modeling and simulation techniques to better understand, predict, and respond to diseases in both ecological and human systems. And I've applied these approaches to the problem areas of infectious disease, non-communicable disease, and also invasive species. So I actually got my undergraduate degree at University of Waterloo, and then I attended Simon Fraser University in British Columbia as a graduate student, both in my master's and PhD, and I was working under the supervision of Dr. Susanna Dragicevic in the Spatial Analysis and Modeling Lab in the Department of Geography there. And many of her graduate assistants, including myself, focused on using agent-based modeling approaches to simulate the spread of bark beetles in Canada. So bark beetles are a group of insects that bore into the bark of trees to oviposit their larval galleries. The larvae feed on the interior of the tree, often causing significant damage or even killing the trees. And in Canada, the most well-known species are the mountain pine beetle, which you see on the left here, and the emerald ash borer on the right. So the mountain pine beetle infests lodgepole pine trees, and the ash borer infests ash trees. The relationship between bark beetles and climate change is multifaceted. So firstly, warmer temperatures that are associated with climate change have allowed the bark beetles to expand their range into areas that were previously unsuitable for its survival. Secondly, climate changes that affect both winter and summer seasons have led to an increase in the beetle's reproductive rate, and this allows the populations to grow rapidly, and has intensified the scale of infestations, increasing the risk of large-scale forest die-offs. And thirdly, climate-induced conditions have the potential to weaken trees, making them more susceptible to bark beetle infestation. So as trees become stressed from intensification of storms, drought, and extreme temperatures, their natural defenses against insects are reduced, making it easier for bark beetles to attack and kill them. The consequences of bark beetle climate interactions are numerous. Widespread tree mortality leads to loss of habitats, of course, for various species, reduced carbon storage, and also increased risk of wildfires. And then additionally, the loss of trees can have negative impacts on local economies that depend on healthy forests. Models of bark beetle spread are essential for predicting infestation patterns, enabling early intervention and targeted management strategies. And these models help allocate resources efficiently, focusing on high-risk areas to minimize ecological and economic impacts. Additionally, understanding driving factors of infestations can inform climate change adaptation and long-term management plans. So agent-based modeling, which is the approach that I use, or ABM, is a computational method used to simulate the interactions of agents, individuals, within a given environment. So the key feature of ABMs is their ability to capture the emergent properties arising from the complex interactions that are taking place at that local level, providing valuable insights into the actual underlying processes that drive the behavior of systems. Agent-based models are useful for studying systems that are characterized by heterogeneity, individual adaptation, as well as spatial dynamics, which is inherent to ecological systems. So in the context of our discussion today, the agents in the model represent individual bark beetles, and the environment consists of the forest landscape, including host trees and other relevant factors. So equation-based models are often also used to simulate the spread of bark beetles, and they have some advantages, including greater computational efficiency. There's fewer input parameters to these models, and it is a little bit easier to incorporate ecological theories. But ABMs also have their own advantages for modeling and understanding the spread of bark beetles. So as this sort of bottom-up modeling approach, agent-based models can capture the unique behaviors and characteristics of the individual bark beetles, including aspects like reproduction, dispersal, adaptation, and host tree preference. And this allows for a more nuanced understanding of how these different behaviors contribute to population dynamics and spread, which can be quite difficult to capture in equation-based models that rely on aggregate level data and assumptions. Furthermore, in contrast to equation-based models that use a constant rate of spread across the study area, agent-based models can represent the spatial heterogeneity of the forest landscape. So accounting for variations, spatial variations in tree species, age, and density, and produce more realistic spread dynamics. Agent-based models are well known for their ability to answer what-if style questions, and this provides decision support by predicting and assessing the effectiveness of different interventions before stakeholders invest time and resources in them. So in the example of insect infestation, we might ask, where and when will the invasive species spread? But we can also ask, what if the climate changes? How will that impact the distribution of the species? What if we vaccinate? Yes, you can vaccinate trees or cut down trees that are infested with these bark beetles. Will that have an impact on the propagation of the species? What if we restrict the movement of wood products like firewood, which is a common intervention used in Canada? And what if we introduce a biological control of the species? So using an ABM to answer such questions can help to find the most optimal strategies to mitigate the spread of the insect. One example of this is assessing the effectiveness of biological control. So biological control is an eradication approach where ecology is used as a weapon against itself. The emerald ash borer, which is an invasive wood-boring beetle native to Asia that has become a significant threat to ash trees in Canada, this was the species of focus for my graduate studies, is sort of rapidly destroying the ecological environment across Canada, causing widespread tree mortality and having considerable economic impact on forestry and urban tree management. And in Canada, the EAB, or the emerald ash borer, has no known predators. So in around 2015, the Tetrastechus planopenisi, or what I call the TP for short, a stingless wasp, was imported from countries in Asia to feed on the larvae of the EAB and reduced its population. Now, the strategies to release the TP were largely ad hoc, and so we demonstrated the use of the agent-based modeling approach to test the impact of different release strategies on the EAB population. The model consisted of several types of agents, including the EAB adult and larvae, the TP adult and larvae, and then also the trees themselves. The tree agents were informed using real geospatial data representing tree location, tree type, and tree size, which we acquired from a small city in Ontario. I think it was Oakville, actually. And the two species in the model, the EAB and the TP, they have quite similar behavior and they have a similar life cycle, although the exact parameters, such as the maximum distance that they can fly and the time they spend in each life cycle, differs. So the model logic is represented in the figure here. And in short, the EAB and TP agents disperse locally. They select their tree hosts based on preferences, and they oviposit their eggs, their larvae. The EAB offspring hatch, and their larvae eat the tree as they grow, and the TP offspring hatch, and their larvae eat the EAB larvae as they grow. The tree host selection process is an important part of the model. So this is a local process from which the system level patterns of forest infestation emerge. There are 4 major factors that are outlined in the literature that contribute to the host selection process, including distance to the tree. So the closer the tree is, the more likely the EAB will move to that tree. the tree type, where some types of ash are more preferred over others, the tree size, where the larger the tree, the more likely the larval gallery will survive, and the tree stress, where higher stress leads to more successful oviposition. So the data set actually had tree condition as an attribute, and we were able to leverage that. The stingless wasp host selection is actually dependent on the EAB. So it sort of follows the same pattern of infestation, because the stingless wasp actually listen for vibrations within the tree as a way to detect the larval galleries that their offspring can feed upon. And so as a result, in the model, the stingless wasp are more likely to infest trees that are already infested with the emerald ash borer. So this figure demonstrates the importance of incorporating host tree preferences in the model, where on the left-hand side, we see the pattern of infestation given those 4 factors. And on the right, we see the pattern of infestation if the host selection is random. So a little bit more realistic on the left-hand side. The model aims to answer the following questions. So what if we release different densities of TP? What if we release TP in multiple locations? And what if we release the TP at different times of the year? And the results indicate that the EAB population is most impacted with increased release density of TP, although there is a point where it becomes sort of marginal in terms of the impact because of competition between the TP larvae. The release in May, in the second year of the EAB initial infestation, which gives time for reduction of the population of the EAB prior to the actual emergence of the EAB in June. So the TP actually have a longer active period between May and September versus the EAB in June to August. And then the more release points, the better. So these were sort of the interventions that we came up with that would be most strategic for the release of these species. And the results were mostly consistent with the literature in that on average, after 1 year of release, there's a 1 to 2% reduction in the EAB population. But if we release the TP in May in the second year, we can actually get up to 4% reduction. So jumping to a slightly different topic here, in my PhD, I became interested in how abstracting systems to graphs or networks could help predict the dynamics of systems that operate on such networks. So in addition, in my PhD, I proposed a novel modeling approach called geographic network automata that is based entirely on spatial network representations of complex systems and their evolution over space and time as a function of the dynamics that are taking place on and within those networks. And this approach can be implemented at multiple scales. So you see finer scale where each node in the network is a tree on the left, and more coarse scale resolution where each node is actually a forest stand. And this modeling approach sits under the larger framework of geographic automata systems because the approach includes elements of time, space, and transition rules at the local level from which spatial structures emerge in the same way that ABM and other complex systems modeling approaches do, but using a network data structure and network rules.
Taylor, can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear you.
Well, you've just got about 2 or 3 more minutes to wrap up if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. So in the case of the EAB, the spatial network is composed of nodes and links, where nodes represent forest stands, and we acquired the location of these nodes from some data from the US Forestry Service. And each of the nodes were evaluated for their potential susceptibility to EAB infestation based on several factors. Oops. And the links actually represent a dispersal event. So there were 2 types of dispersal events. We had short distance dispersal, where the EAB could disperse within 20 kilometers. So if there was an infested node that was within 20 kilometers of a susceptible node, a link would form at the next time step. And then long distance dispersal events, which were random. So an infested node had the probability P of infesting another node through a long distance dispersal event based on their susceptibility to long distance dispersal. So in this figure here, you can see the green points representing the forest stands containing ash trees in Michigan, and the pink points shows when they've become infested. And not seen here is actually the trees can die off after they've been infested for a certain number of years. So the nodes are removed from the network. And we compared from sort of like a high level visual comparison between our network representation and some real data, which you see on the right-hand side. And we found that we were able to really capture sort of the rate at which local dispersal occurs. We were also able to capture some of these satellite populations, these long distance jumps. And of course, we missed some long distance jumps as well. So in summary, bottom-up representations of forest insect infestation, either as a network or an agent-based model, can both predict where and when bark beetles will spread and explore the use of what-if scenarios to better intervene. And these types of models are not sufficient for modeling changes in climate, which plays a direct role on the bark beetle's behavior, reproduction, and spread, and could provide important insights for long-term forest management as climate changes. And so collaborations between climate scientists potentially using mathematical models and ecologists or simulation experts employing agent-based models are important going forward and can potentially lead to a more comprehensive understanding of the interactions between climate change and bark beetle movement. And so that's all I have. Here's some acknowledgements, and my contact has changed since I've been working on these projects, but feel free to reach out to me via this email. So thank you.
Really wonderful, and I appreciate your willingness to go back in time and revisit your graduate years.